Welcome to the next knowledge area, project scope management. So, if you remember, when I was explaining the introduction of the project management knowledge areas, I was talking about the project triple constraints. So, if you remember clearly, the project scope is one of the constraint from this triple constraints of the project management. So, along with that, we know that uh, there is time, quality, cost. These are the three other knowledge areas which contributes to in addition to scope, project scope, all these four contributes to a triple constraints of the project. So this knowledge area is very much important for us after the integration management. So let's try and explore the more details about the project scope management. So what the project scope management is, what does it includes? The project scope management includes all the processes to ensure that the project contains all the work and only the work required to complete the project successfully. This is primarily concerned with defining what is and what is not included in the project. It is very important. All the work and only the work required to complete the project successfully. Nothing more, nothing less. The scope contains only the work which is required for project completion. Doesn't include anything else. Okay, so many times we used to follow a terminologies in our daily conversations in the project management called in scope, out scope. So anything which is not there in the scope of agreed scope of the project is called as out of scope, and whatever is there agreed as part of the scope of the project is called as in scope. So it is very much important for a project manager or for the team who is basically defining the scope of the project is very well put the activities which are in scope for this project or for any project. So scope management is primarily concerned with defining what is and what is not included in the project. Very important. It gives you some ideas, tools and techniques, some processes which will help you to include the activities which are only required for completion of the project. All other activities will be treated as out of scope of this project and will be taken separately. We have already seen in the project context the features and functions that characterizes a product, service or result is called as a product scope. So if you remember, we talked about this. When it comes to a project scope, there are two scope terminologies we can say. It's a product scope and the project scope. So this is the first one, that is a product scope. So the features and functions that characterize a product, service or result is called as a product scope. So once you execute the project and you generate the end product, the features of that end product or the functions which are provided by that end product are comes under the product scope. And what do you mean by project scope? All the work needed to deliver a product or service or result as defined in the product scope is called as project scope. Very simple. We talked about the product scope. We know that product scope contributes to the features and functions of the end product, but the work required to generate that product or work required to deliver that product or a service is called as project scope. Thus the project scope is the work that must be done to deliver a product with specified features and functions. Underline this statement with the specified features and functions. It is not only the work required to complete the product, but it is also the work required to complete the product with specified features and functions. So it's nothing but delivering a product or service with as defined as per the product scope. Okay, so what else comes under the project scope management? Unapproved change in the scope can affect the success of the project, and it may cause and cost and schedule overrun. Very important. And that is why it is important for us to define the scope of the project, because any unapproved change in the scope can affect the success of the project, and it may cause and cost and schedule overrun. And that is why gold plating is not recommended as a best practice in the project management. What do you mean by gold plating? Gold plating is nothing but the extra work which is done on top of the agreed project scope to fleece the customer, or to basically given, or it is not documented anywhere and it is delivered just as part of the relations. So that is called as gold plating. Why it is not recommended? Because that is an additional work which you are doing on agreed scope, and that additional work might not have gone through the proper change cycle or change control. So once we are saying it is not going through the proper change control, it means that we are not following the proper validation methodology, the impact of that change across the system. And that is why there is a greater possibility of causing a lot of rework at the end of implementation of that change, which is unapproved, and hence it is called as unapproved change in the scope can affect the success of the project, and it may causes and cost and schedule overrun. Because if there is a rework at the end of implementation, you have to redo the activities, which incurs additional time and additional cost to the project. The incremental expansion of scope of the project by introducing more requirements that are not part of the initial scope of the project is called as scope creep. This is also one important terminology which is used in the project scope management, called as a scope creep. So we agree some X requirements today and then go ahead or kick off the project, and then when project progresses, customer comes back and keeps on adding the requirements to the project. So yes, that is not completely unavoidable, because in today's world there are a lot of dynamics and business requirements keep on changing time to time. So yes, as a vendor or as a project manager, we need to respond to those requirements, but there is a way to do that. So the incremental expansion of scope of the project by introducing more requirements that are not part of the initial scope of the project is called a scope creep. This is also not a recommended practice in the project management methodology, because if scope creep happens, then there is a possibility of again having the rework at the end of the implementation. So in order to manage the project effectively, one has to go and manage the scope creep also effectively. There are two angles to it. If you don't manage or if you don't agree as it is, so that for the new requirements which are coming from the customer, probably customer satisfaction is going to impact. So it is a matter of how effectively we manage those change requests or requirements. As a project manager, we should be able to justify customer that okay, whatever the new requirements are coming in are causing the impact to a critical modules of the project, and if there is any issue, it is going to have a rework on overall project. So as a project manager, you go and evaluate those additional requirements which are coming from the customers. Okay, try to evaluate it properly, try to analyze its impact, and then based on impact, okay, try to pass these requirements through a proper change integrated change control process, and then try to get it approved, so that it will not become as a scope creep, or it will not become as a gold plated change. So once the change requests are approved, yes, that has to be planned and executed as part of the project execution. but as a project manager you need to get it through a proper cycle and get it executed, so that at the end customer will stay also happy, and you will also following proper project management methodologies in order to ensure that whatever the product or the deliverables you are going to create out of the project will be a quality one. Okay.